Welcome to the Open Apple podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a long-time user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 63 for September 2016. I am your co-host the first, Quinn Dunkey, and with me as always is co-host the second, Mike McGinnis. How you doing, Mike?
I'm all right, Quinn. It feels like just a month ago that we did another one of these, but because it was a month ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, the months go by quickly or very slowly, I guess, depending on how much you enjoy doing this.
How are you, Quinn?
I'm doing good. It's been a busy month at work, but have managed to squeeze a little bit of retro stuff in, which we can talk about. Actually, the breaking news as of actually last night, as we record this, James Littlejohn found an incompatibility between the Megabeep ROM, which I was selling at KansasFest, and the ProDOS 2.4 update from John Brooks, which we'll be talking about later in the show. So yeah, so apparently the two of them don't like each other. So me and John have been going back and forth on Twitter and email trying to work that out. Some little quirk in how the two of them are doing things. So we'll figure that out. But aside from that, everything is going peachy over here. How about you? Any retro stuff going on?
Actually, I've been spending a lot of time with my Hero Junior robot and getting that thing back up and running because it arrived sans battery or charger. And thanks to Henry Corbis over at Ultimate Micro, I now have a charger, and I ordered a new battery kit and all kinds of stuff. So I hope to have that up and running soon, which is great because it has a nice big RS 232 port on the back, which I'm hoping I can just plug right into my Apple II and start bit banging away.
Very cool. Yeah, I noticed a Hero Robot section suddenly appeared on the Reactive Micro storefront. Yeah. I guess that's why.
Well, you know, Henry, if he can sell one, he can sell 10. Sorry, Henry.
Exactly. Maybe if you can sell 10, you can sell 100. You never know.
That's right.
That's how it starts.
Yep.
I'm Ben Heck, and you're listening to the Open Apple Podcast.
All right. Well, we've got a fun interview today. Speaking of KansasFest, we always like to see new faces at K-Fest, and this year, as in many previous years, there's been a sharp uptick in new attendees, and one of those new attendees joins us here today. We have Kate Szkotnicki on the show, and she made quite a splash this year at K-Fest. So.
I guess you'd put it that way.
Welcome to the show, Kate. It's nice to have you.
Thanks. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
So, like we always like to start, tell us about your journey to the Apple II. How did you start with it?
I started with it when I was a little kid, and we had an Apple IIc when I was growing up. My dad got it for us when I was in 5th grade, and I spent a lot of time playing with it. And it was just something I was really annoyed. I remember when he sold it. So once I finally got my own money and my own life, and I'm like, I want to get the stuff I had when I was a kid. So I started, I picked up a 2E and the 2 for free.
Wow.
And then I was just randomly on the internet, and I was like, wait, there's a convention for this stuff? And it took me about 3 years to get my life together, and I went, and it was awesome, and I can't wait to go back.
That's usually the progression of, wait, there's a conference for this? And then...
I mean, I've been to anime cons, and I've been to gaming cons, and I've been to sci-fi cons, so I guess it shouldn't surprise me that there's an Apple II con,
sure,
but
why not?
Sure, let's go.
Yeah, it always starts with that first Google. It's, oh, I remember this thing, and there's other people that use these. Oh, there's websites. Oh, there's podcasts. Oh, there's a conference. Oh my gosh, it's huge.
So between your dad getting rid of your 2C and then the recent acquisitions, has your life been free of Apple II, or?
I played around with emulators when I went to college, and I found out they had like NES emulators and SNES emulators, and somewhere along the line I got the brilliant idea to Google Apple emulators, so I played with Apple Win and then Virtual 2 until I could get the actual metal, and I still use them when I'm on the road, so... I mean, I went IBM because everybody did in the 90s, and then Windows 10 brought me back to or Windows 8 brought me back to Apple in the form of I wasn't buying that, so I went Mac, and then it just kind of went from, and now I'm sitting here next to my 3 retro machines, and
So yeah, you mentioned acquiring these things for free. How did that happen?
I was on, I don't even remember. I can't remember if it was Craigslist or if it was the KFest mailing list, but I was basically just put out there, hey, look, want to buy or want to acquire. And somebody who was right after I moved to the Washington area and said, hey, I live in, Maryland, not too far away, and I'm giving these away. And I was looking for one for an art piece that I was doing. And I was looking, he said I would working 2E, and I have this other Apple thing that doesn't work. And I was like, okay, I'll come get them. And I grabbed a friend and drove up to Columbia, Maryland, and picked these things up and played with the 2E, shoved the other one under my bed till I got around to making this dress that I was going to make. And then when I pulled it out to make the dress, I realized that he handed me a low serial number Apple II.
Wow.
And I decided not to take it apart. I decided that would be a bad idea, so it hung out under my bed until I took it to K-Fest and we got it working after a fashion. So right now it's not hooked up to anything right now because it's kind of my show. We don't touch this a whole lot. It's just there.
Understood. Do you mind me asking what's the serial number on that?
9919, I think. Hang on, stretch. I'm literally sitting next to this stuff. 9919.
Wow, that's definitely a low number. Now you mentioned a third machine. You said you had 3 of them.
Oh, I got a 2GS at KansasFest.
Oh yeah, in fact, I saw a picture of you on the Cult of Mac article.
Yes, I was the meta picture for the Cult of Mac with my new shiny
nice.
toy, and then Javier took it out and had me retrobraided it, and it was like I had the whole package, like starting like day -1. It was, here, we're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to pretend, oh yeah, and you're presenting. And I was just like, just kind of walked in and was like, hi, I'm here, and I'm going to take over the place.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's quite an iconic K-Fest photo of you sitting on the floor of the Coker and Hall lobby area playing with the 2GS.
We're putting my keyboard back together.
Yeah.
So is this your first experience with a 2GS?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the, playing with the ones we had at school, which was basically, look, it's Oregon Trail,
right.
yay!
Yep. Now I did see your the KansasFest presentation that they put up, your silicone molding and rosin casting, and I also know that you won the tie contest, and we'll get to details on that in just a minute. But it seems like you have a really strong background in of things. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I mean, when I first started going to anime cons, I wanted to do costumes. I've always loved dressing up, and I've always loved Halloween, and so I started making costumes and going to anime and sci-fi cons and competing in costume contests and winning awards. I've won a bunch of awards for costumes, and in the process, you learn, you learn how to sew, but you also learn, I want to make this prop, I want to make this piece of jewelry, I want to make this thing, so you have to learn how to do it. So I know how to resin, I know how to silicone mold, I know how to resin cast, I know how to carve wood, I know how to carve styrofoam, I know how to do paper mache. There's like all kinds of weird things I know how to do. And it was kind of like one of those, when I was originally the second thought for the art piece I was doing, it was a dress actually. I did not wear this dress to K-Fest because it's too hard. I was afraid I would get something on it. But I have an Apple II themed like ball dress too. And the second thought was take some of the keys off the 2 and cast them to make the jewelry I wanted to make. And then I found out how hard that was and didn't do that either. But that led me to say, well, I bet there's a bunch of guys, I bet, people would be interested in this because 3D printing is hard and 3D printing is expensive and 3D printing is still kind of a pain in the butt. This is not. So I emailed the committee, hey, do you think this would be? And they're like, oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. And then even when I got there, it was really weird because I like this first Tuesday or Wednesday, I can't even remember. It's like there's like a 7-day blur in my memory that's KansasFest. And they're like, oh, I can't wait for your presentation. And I'm like, okay. And then even at the end, when I brought out the candy I had made, and everybody's like, do you have enough for the room? I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't expecting this many people.
Yeah, I think yours was definitely one of the most popular ones. It was one that I was really glad to see. I really like seeing these kinds of unexpected things at K-Fest, and I think that your analysis of the situation really nailed it as far as why people were interested. I think 3D printing is something that everyone's excited about, but it's much more primitive and much more difficult than I think most people realize. It's much more limited, and so yeah, this sort of more sort of old school way of making plastic parts is like, as you pointed out, much easier and frankly gives a lot better results for most things. So I think, yeah, a lot of us were really excited to see that happen. And, the way you did it right on stage and showed how frankly easy it can be, I think was really powerful for people.
Well, I mean, I teach for a living, so I mean, I'm a home economics teacher in the real world. So
okay.
And I also, I had taught, I think I mentioned this in the presentation, I'd work with our drama department for their shows, and I had shown them how to do that too. So it was just kind of like, yeah, I teach, so this is completely natural for me.
Excellent. Well, I hope you have something else lined up for next year too, because we'll want to see
I know. I'm not sure how I'm going to follow up this year. I'm kind of stressing about that already.
But it sounds like you are going to be there next year.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Now I'm not only am I going to be there, I'm trying to like suck a couple of my friends into the pit with me. So
awesome.
Excellent.
That's great.
So we should talk about your speaking of creative things, you should talk about your tie contest entry. So for anyone who doesn't know, K-Fest, one of the annual traditions is a tie contest, and in the spirit of diversity, it's now sort of become morphing into slowly sort of a goofy outfit contest. And you sort of stole the show this year with a dress that you'd made. Tell us about that.
Yeah. While I was working on the actual ball gown, I knew that Balticon, which is the convention I was competing it at, had a show and tell the next day for everybody who's in the costume contest. And I'm like, I'm going to make an outfit to wear for that. So I got some felt, and I made a giant poodle skirt, so it's a tan poodle skirt, only instead of the poodle, I put a 5 1/4 inch floppy on it. And then I went out and I went out on Amazon. I'd already bought the crinoline anyway. So I have this huge, like, double fluff crinoline with this wool skirt. Yeah, which was probably not the smartest thing to wear in Kansas City in July, but we went outside for the picture and I about died. And then over that, I took a piece from the ball gown that I'd made. It was a cape that I made to look like the Disc 2 drive. So the back is tan and the front is black, and it has a little LED on it that actually lights up. Because I've done light up stuff in the past too, so that was easy to just solder an LED to a battery thing and be done. And it says Disc 2, and the little clasp looks like the little drive door, and it was fun to make and fun to wear. And I did wear I wore it when I wore it at Balticon the next day. It was like, oh, you match your costume, you're so cute. I'm like, yes, I do, thank you. And decided if somebody, all my friends wanted me to wear the other dress, but I'm like, this dress is made of velvet and crepe, and if I get pizza on it, I'm just going to cry. The poodle skirt I can at least take to the dry cleaner and have the pizza taken out of it. That was and then it was just a black shirt. I just threw a black shirt on with it, and and loafers, and I actually own a pair of bobby socks. So it was fun, and it was just kind of one of those. I'd seen some really cool stuff in the past with the ties, because I went and looked on a bunch of old KansasFest pictures. So I was just really looking forward to compete. I don't want to say competing, because I'm not. Oh yeah, I am a competitive person, but whatever. But I just looking forward to showing everybody what I could do.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's quite a long and storied history behind the tie contest. So winning that's a pretty awesome thing.
Yeah, I went in and because I almost felt bad, because I also did the door thing. I did 3rd place in the door, and I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm just like this random person that drove 15 hours and took over all your things. And when I think it was Sean, he's like, no, that's fine. That's what we want. We want people to come in with new ideas and new thoughts, and it's okay, and don't feel bad. And
yeah.
So what was your door entry?
I actually did a lot of it. I went on the print shop, and I have an image writer too with my rig, and I printed I went into Banner and I printed like 3 letters at a time, because I don't have the form feed paper. So I printed 3 letters at a time and cut them out and then colored them with crayons, like I did when I was 9. And I did like a bulletin board type thing. So I had cut all the letters out, and my door said Apple II Forever, KansasFest 2016. And I think I printed the apple and the disc and the computer, and I colored them, and just there's pictures of it online, and it looks like a teacher bulletin board is exactly what it looks like. So it was like, I'm like, now everybody's giving me a hard time because I don't know, because they're like, oh, you have to join InterHackFest now. I'm like, sure.
I think that was what was perfect about your door, is that it looked exactly like a teacher bulletin board from 1985. Like, it just, all of us have seen that, and it was fantastic.
That's exactly what I was going for, too, yeah.
Yeah, the fact that you used an actual image writer, too, was pretty great. I'm actually impressed that you were able to do that. It's getting hard to find the ink cartridges that aren't all dried out.
The black ones aren't terribly hard to find. I think there's still, I know that even up until the place my dad worked at, they dealt in used cars, and they had an impact printer. Even, no matter how much they upgraded their system, they had to be able to use an impact printer, because when you sell a car, there's like multi-part forms that they have to fill out. And, because I said to him, aren't you guys ever going to upgrade your printer? He said, we can't, because we have to, their state, like the state requires these forms. So they have to be able to fill out carbon forms. So I feel like there's still a lot of impact printers in industry. The color cartridges, you can't get.
Now, does the image writer? I'm not as familiar with that. Are you able to re-ink those, the color ones?
You could way back when they had kits. I remember seeing them in A+, but I mean, whenever we had a color ribbon back then, my dad would hide it because he knew I would just completely destroy it.
Yeah, we re-inked before we had an image writer in my house. We had an Epson, one of those Japanese Epson clones, and we would re-ink the ribbons, and it did mostly work. The problem is you'd get maybe one additional pass, but the actual cotton ribbon itself would wear out. That was sort of
that's not good, because I for one of the pieces of the Balticon dress is a headband fasten, like it's called a fascinator. It's like what they wear in England with the big giant headpiece, and it's made of image writer. I actually ripped apart an image writer color ribbon and washed it and dried it and made a big flower out of it, and it's not good cotton at all. I had to put 2 or 3 layers in and put some like stiffener in it before I could even work with it. It's that I can see where the impact would completely destroy them.
That's really interesting. Do you have pictures of that?
I do. Yeah, I'll have to send you guys some pictures of I have pictures people took at Balticon, because then on stage I took the Apple II on stage with me, and all the guys who work in tech at the convention who are they're old school techs, and they're all looking at me like, "Where did you get that?" I was like, "It's mine. Don't touch it."
That's amazing. Yeah, please do share pictures. We'll put them in the show notes.
I will send you guys some pictures. Yeah.
Now, what level do you teach at?
High school.
Okay, and have you found a way to integrate your love for the retro stuff into any of your teaching?
Yes, I do actually. My admins have already asked me if I'm doing this lesson again. Last year, I teach a course called Teachers for Tomorrow, or Teacher Cadet. It's basically gives seniors a chance to experience education. We spend 18 weeks talking about child development and the history of education and theories of education. And then they go out into the community. We send them to elementary and middle schools to do what amounts to student teaching light. So I was looking for something to do the day before Christmas, because half the kids are always absent anyway. So I decided to do a lesson on technology in the classroom, what it used to be like. So I took my Apple IIe in, and I set up a bunch of stations. So Apple Win runs off a jump drive, so I didn't have to mess too much with it. And I had them play Oregon Trail and Odell Lake and Number Munchers and Factory, and I had them reflect on it. I ended up doing an article in Juice.gs about it, and the kids loved it. They thought that was like, oh my gosh, this is really fun. I need my homeroom. I had it set up, and my homeroom was like, I think my grandparents have one of these. I was like, thanks, guys. Thanks so much. And my admins in August, one of my assistant principals said to me, "Are you going to do the retro tech thing again? Because that was really cool and I didn't get to come see it last year and I want to see it this year." So apparently, yes, I'm doing it again.
Awesome.
So yeah, I have. And then I do, I sponsor the school's video game club. So I've been known to take some of the retro stuff. I also have a working NES and a working Atari 2600. So I've been known to take some of the retro gear in and have the kids and let the kids play with it. And I had a good time watching them try to play Zork. And they enjoyed it. That was the funny thing, was they were like, they got eaten by the Gru and they just kept going back and trying again. Like they were actually really getting into it. I was like, okay, this is cool.
Nice.
Very, very cool. So do you have any other future projects planned with your Apple IIs, like especially your new 2GS?
I'm actually working on relearning all of my BASIC, because I knew it once upon a time and I keep toying with learning assembly. And then I said something to our computer science teacher and he's like, "Why would you want to do that to yourself?" I wore my KansasFest t-shirt to one of our teacher work days and then he's like, he looked at it and he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's some assembly code. It works. We know what it does."
Yeah.
So that probably, I'm taking it into school, messing with it, playing games on it. I haven't really been messing with it too much since I got home. I got home from KansasFest and basically school started.
Okay.
So it's also been like overly warm in my house. So it's been a weird couple of months since KansasFest, but now things are settling down and I'm getting into actually like really messing with them.
Great. So you have some awesome stuff next year for us to see.
I hope.
Yeah, so maybe you will submit something to Hackfest next year.
That's kind of actually what I was thinking. I said I kind of need to get the trifecta.
For sure. Well, you sort of got your feet wet. I should mention that I roped you into judging Hackfest this year, and your assistance was much appreciated there.
It was fun.
Yeah, so maybe next year you'll be on the other side of the judges' table.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not making any promises.
All right. Well, Quinn, do you have any other questions for Kate?
I don't think so. I'm glad to hear we'll see you next year at K-Fest, and looking forward to many other cool things.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, Kate. We appreciate your time. And we look forward to seeing you in July.
Yes.
Remember how determined your parents were to give you the gift of knowledge, no matter how many gifts it took? Today, you have a big advantage with the Apple II GS. Apple II computers are found in more schools than any other computer. Your parents gave you the world. You can give your kids the universe.
All right, well, thanks, Kate, once again. And Mike, we got some news to cover here. Why don't we dive into that?
Sounds good to me.
It may be old, but there's still news. Apple II news.
So we talked last month about the reborn VCF West. What do we got here, Mike? Some pictures?
Yeah, so somebody posted a handful of pictures, not a whole lot, but a few of them on Imager. And you can go there right now. It starts out with a picture of Topo, the robot that wishes it were my hero, but isn't. I'm kidding. I really want one of those too. It's a cool looking robot. And it goes kind of through some of the more of the machine close-ups, which are cool, but it doesn't really give you a good perspective on like how many people are there, what the setup is like, but still a lot of fun to look through as well. And I always am interested in seeing pictures of the conventions that I can't get to that aren't necessarily Apple II based, some of the equipment and the people that show up there. So
Yeah, there's some great photos in there. My only wish is that there was more captioning of them, because like there's the first few there, I think, are like original Amiga prototype boards, where they had where each custom chip was a giant PCB hand, wire wrapped and stuff. And I think that's what those first pictures are, but there's no captions, so I'm not really sure. But some neat hardware there.
Yeah, well, and speaking of uncaptioned pictures, there's a photo of looks like a little camera that says Cyclops on the side, and underneath it on a piece of paper is handwritten "Original Altair Cyclops," which I think is video capture for that old Altair, and I wish I knew more about that, but yeah, there's not a lot of detail there.
Yeah, very cool. Anyway. All right, well, let's see. Next up, we've got something on the Kazan soft strip, which myself, like possibly many of our readers, this was brought back into our minds by a recent Antic Atari podcast. They actually did a kind of a series on this thing, and I think it was mainly an Apple II thing, but it did exist on a couple other 8-bits as well. And for anyone who doesn't remember this thing, there was this and a couple of other, I think, competing ones that I seem to recall, but the idea was instead of typing in software from magazines, they would print the binary as a sort of elaborate type of barcode, and you would buy this handheld device and scan the page of the magazine and get your software that way. And no forms of it really ever caught on, but it was a cool idea.
I think that this was made for the Apple II and the IBM PC, and they had plans to do more, and it just didn't happen because it didn't catch on. It is kind of a bulky plastic apparatus that you set on the desk and lay over this long barcode. It reminds me a lot, like it seems like a progenitor that the ill-fated QCat, if you remember that thing, that was scanning barcodes, but what it was really doing was selling your information to advertisers. And much later, it sort of resembles kind of the modern day QR codes.
Yeah, and I feel like it was a classic chicken and egg problem, right? Nobody was buying the things because there wasn't enough magazines with the software, and the magazines weren't running software because nobody had the thing. But I think if it had come along maybe 5 years sooner, I think it really could have been something, because there was that early magazine period where people were typing in a lot of software for magazines, and this thing would have been a lifesaver. But then it came out really late in that era, and people were really just starting to buy things on floppy disks and so on by then, and people were really not typing stuff in for magazines anymore anyway. So kind of missed its narrow window, I think, to become a thing.
Right. So this article is by Chris Osborne, and we'll obviously have all this in the show notes. And maybe one of the reasons that it didn't catch on was because the thing about the barcodes is that they were of a proprietary format. So nobody could license these things out and print their own software. You could enter your program in BASIC or assembly, and it would generate a barcode for you. But I think that was slow and didn't work very well. And what Chris did was go through and I guess decrypt it and break the code, so to speak. And now he's got an easy way to create his own barcodes that he can scan in on. Looks like he's got his hooked up to an IBM PC. If you have the chance, plug. I also over on Apple2Scans.net have a bunch of the software and the manual scanned in for the Apple II version, and you can check those out.
Oh, cool. I didn't actually know that. We'll make sure to put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. And the catch is, unfortunately, the one that I got was complete and the disks weren't bad. So I was able to create the disk images of the software that you need. Otherwise, it's just a fancy plastic thing that sits there and does nothing.
Yeah, and you can buy these things on eBay. I think they're not even that expensive, right? Because nobody knows what they're for or why you would want one, and there's no way to use them anymore because the magazines weren't that popular. And so it's just this sort of bizarre artifact, this plastic lump that... Yeah,
and when I got mine, and I don't know if this is a common thing or not, but I guess, I don't know if they use cheap plastic or whatever material in the plastic has dried up. It's very fragile now and brittle. So like if you touch this thing wrong, parts just like start snapping off of it. So you got to be kind of careful with these because they're old and yeah, because they weren't popular, it's sort of a curiosity more than anything else. Like what could have been.
Yeah. I'll see if I can find the Antic podcast where they talked about they talked to the engineer who developed this thing, and it was really interesting. The way they did the tracking was really, really clever and really ahead of its time. There was apparently, I mean, I guess you wouldn't think about it, but there's a really difficult optical challenge there, coming up with a lens system that can read this barcode and track it and ingest the data at whatever crazy speeds and different kinds of paper and all these different problems. So it's actually a pretty hard problem, and their solutions were clever.
And in fact, I think Chris talks about it a little bit. So he had found some of the PDF scans. I don't know if he used mine or somebody else's, but he tried to just print them out and scan, and they wouldn't because of what you're talking about, the lensing problems, and you got to get the resolution just right. And if it's very, within these, the confines, of the parameters of this thing. And if it slips outside at all, it doesn't work. So
interesting stuff. All right, moving right along, we've got some Halt and Catch Fire news, which we haven't had for a little while. Mike, I don't watch the show anymore because I don't have cable, so you'll have to take this one for me.
Oh, boo, boo. Okay, so Halt and Catch Fire has metaphorically come out of the Commodore closet, so to speak. They are all Commodore all the time. C64 is everywhere. There's mentions of Petsky and Amiga, and just disgusting. I hate it. I'm kidding. It's actually really awesome. But there's a fascinating article over on fastcompany.com where Harry McCracken kind of took a backstage tour of the set, and he goes through and he talks about all of the little stuff that you see kind of in the background. You might get a glimpse of like, what is that piece of equipment on the shelf? And it's actually really intricate, and the production company spends a lot of time making sure they get all of these little details right.
Very cool. Yeah, I guess if you have to pick one actual retro brand from the period to commit to and actually say out loud on the air, Commodore is probably the only choice, because it's kind of the only company that is definitely dead. Sorry, Commodore. But the rest of those companies all sort of still exist in some form or another, for the most part. At least somebody still owns the rights to them, and I think there's some dude in Germany that bought all the Commodore rights or whatever. But I'm sure I'll get angry emails from Commodore fans having just got all those facts wrong. But I think, you certainly couldn't do that with Apple or Atari, or, those brands are still active and still have armies of lawyers behind them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're not watching the show, you're really missing out as a retro fan. I like the way that, especially in this season, it seems like this cast of characters, and especially the company that the young Cameron set up with her business partner. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it's really become they've really become this blank slate on which they can tell a lot of different stories from that time period in Silicon Valley and elsewhere early in the computer revolution. So this year you have the Joe McMillan character, but he's dressing like Steve Jobs now with the round glasses and the tennis shoes. But the story that they're telling with him is actually of John McAfee or however you pronounce that. And how kind of nuts he gets. And and the Cameron story is about, wrestling control or keeping control over her company as it grows, and trying to find sort of how Silicon Valley startups have to go find funding, and you don't want to get in bed with the wrong people, and how difficult that can be. So they've done a really great job of growing from the original story, which I think was about how Compaq cloned the IBM PC, and they've moved into all these other areas, and they've done so pretty fluidly and seamlessly. I really, really like the show.
Cool. All right. Well, if I recall, it's watchable online, right? Eventually, like
I think it shows up on
website.
Yeah, and then eventually on Hulu and places like that.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, I look forward to eventually knowing what you're talking about.
Awesome.
Okay.
And good for you for cutting the cable, by the way.
Yeah. I should have done it sooner. God, it's great. My cable bill is a third of what it was, and I don't miss it one bit. All right, Apple One news. We have an interesting auction of sorts, just when we thought we were done with Apple One auctions. I'll let you talk about this one, Mike, but I will just say I predict our listeners who read this article will be angry.
Okay.
Proceed, sir.
Okay, after I talk about it, you're going to have to say why you're angry, but let's talk about this first. So last month we talked about this, the quote-unquote celebration Apple One, which was a prototype, apparently, that doesn't look like any of the others and seems to be earlier and uses newer pieces, and it's pretty much a guarantee that this was, before the Byte Shop and before anything else, which made it a lot more valuable, and they were expecting it to be auctioned for more than $1 million. And they had Corey Cohen, who we've mentioned a few times on the show now. He actually goes in, cleans these things up, verifies them, makes sure they're working before they go to auction. We need to have him on the show, by the way.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, they were all expecting this to go for, $1 million or more. And sadly, it went for a paltry $815,000. Yes, the bubble has burst, folks. But Fortune.com has an article with the people who purchase this, and that's kind of unusual because normally the buyers are either, they want to stay anonymous because they don't want people breaking into their house and trying to steal this thing, or it ends up in like the Henry Ford Museum, places like that, which is great if you want to go see, but usually the people who buy them don't talk about it. And in this case, we get a look behind the curtains, I guess, a little bit. Glenn and Shannon Delamore, who co-founded a skincare line called Glam Glow, which was bought by Estee Lauder for millions and millions of dollars. They bought it and they gave an interview to Fortune, and there are a couple of other websites out there that have also talked to them. But it's an interesting article. I don't think these individuals are really retro Apple fans.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just to wrap up what you're saying, I think it's safe to say that the bottom has fallen out of the Apple One auction market because there were just nondescript Apple Ones, I think, that didn't even work, that went for much more than this, a year or so ago. So the fact that this is like, an original, possibly pre-prototype version, fully verified, the holy grail of Apple Ones, and it didn't even crack, 900K. That's actually quite surprising.
And the couple themselves were planning to, they had put a last minute bid in for 1.6 million, and they were thinking of going up as high as 2 million if they had needed to get this thing. So they really wanted it, and I guess good for them for not having to spend that much.
Yeah, I guess they definitely scored. I mean, who knows if the prices on these will ever come back up? I mean, Steve Jobs is only going to die once, so I don't know if that hype curve is ever going to come back the way it did, but who knows? Maybe this thing will continue to appreciate. But yeah, so I think the reason our listeners might be angered by this article is because, everyone gets to spend their money on whatever they want. No judgment here, but the argument could be made these people bought this Apple One for the wrong reasons. When the interview, they talk about why they bought it, and I guess for their makeup company, they had sort of idolized Apple as a canonical example of how to create a strong brand that is really distinctive. And they said that they looked a lot to Apple's packaging and their hardware designs, the level of polish that they put into their, headphone packaging and all that sort of thing. And so for that reason, they wanted the Apple One. And they talked a lot about how Steve Jobs had really created this, this modern idea of a powerful brand. None of which has anything to do with the Apple computer that made this Apple One, and no mention of Steve Wozniak, of course, and no understanding of what the Apple One was or what it represented, or how different the company, the Apple II or the Apple computer of the 80s was versus what it is now. So a weird sort of cargo cult kind of purchase, it seems like they understand, oh, this is the first thing Apple made, ergo we want it, but they don't understand what they're actually buying here. So anyway, no judgment. It's their money, spend it however they want.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough, makes sense. I always wonder about that sort of thing. I get like the Henry Ford Museum wanting one of these because of its historical significance, or I know Woz, I think, held on to a couple of them because they meant something to him personally, because he designed these things and sort of launched him into what he's become today. But you see people like this that maybe, as far as like from where we're standing, maybe miss the point, or at least are looking for something else. Yeah. And it's kind of like, I'll read every now and then you'll see somebody who buys a boxed Apple II for investment purposes. I'm going to send my kids to college on this. And that just doesn't, I think maybe you're overestimating what this is going to be worth in a few years. But I do like the fact that this hobby has all kinds of people from all different walks of life, and they why each of us come to the Apple II. We have our own reasons and our own motivations. And on the one hand, this sort of makes me a little sad, but it's great that I love being able to share these other perspectives and see, why people love the Apple, because I know why I do, but that may not be why you do, or somebody else. So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe, maybe these folks buying this Apple One will, maybe it'll kindle an interest in learning more about what it actually was, and how, the Apple of then is, how it was different than the Apple of now, and what that machine represented for, the consumer computer industry and so on.
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed. That's what happens.
All right, moving right along. Happy birthday, Apple II GS. This is very exciting for me personally. As I posted on Twitter recently, the 2GS was my third and favorite computer that I've ever owned. So I was very glad to see that it turned 30 on the 15th of September, and it was acknowledged widely throughout the Retroverse. So that was nice to see.
Especially over at What is the Apple 2GS website. We've talked about that site plenty. Alex has got a couple of entries on his celebrations that he's put together. There's a picture of I'm sorry, Alex, that cake is a little bit frightening.
It is. I was sort of terrified by that as well. It's the uncanny valley of your nightmares.
Yeah, a little bit. But it does have a nice representation of the Apple 2GS on it. And it's really cool to see that these machines are still in use today, and we're still learning a lot about them. We'll talk a lot about that with, the ProDOS and other things, but in a few minutes. But happy birthday to the 2GS.
Yeah, I got to take this opportunity to shout out to Alex's site. We talked to Kate earlier about how, it starts with that first Google, it gets you sucked back into the Apple II community. And for me, that first Google landed me on his site. And,
oh, nice.
I was like, oh man, the 2GS was so great. Does anyone ever care? Does anyone even remember that thing? And I Googled it. I Googled something Apple 2GS related, landed on his site, and it exploded from there. So thanks, Alex, for that amazing repository of 2GS stuff.
Yeah, very awesome, Sue.
All right. Well, speaking of the thing you just said, I told myself I wasn't going to do any terrible segues this month. And
you failed.
Yeah, here we are 49 minutes in. I've already blown it. All right. Well, we did talk earlier in the intro about John Brooks updating ProDOS, and this has been the talk of the retro sphere, and in fact has even made it mainstream a little bit. Jason Scott mentioned it. It came up on Hackaday. It came up on Boing Boing. So, I think, this is great news. It's really making the rounds. So John Brooks, who, we've talked a lot about on the show and had on the show, has updated ProDOS 2.03 and has named it ProDOS 2.4, which is in keeping with Apple's official numbering scheme, which I liked for major version releases. And he's added a whole ton of features to it. He's added compatibility for a bunch of new clones. He's added compatibility for earlier Apple IIs that got cut out somewhere around ProDOS 2, I think. The 2 pluses and earlier machines got cut out. He's added support for those back in. He's added a new buy program that's much better. So it's really a great update.
Yeah, so you'd mentioned the clones thing, and for anyone who had a clone back then, you might remember Apple put in a clone check, and if it failed that, your ProDOS would not boot on your machine for no other reason than that it was a clone, and that was kind of unfortunate. And as the machines moved over to the 65 CO2 and the enhancement kits for the 2E and things like that, the newer versions of ProDOS stopped working on those old machines. So it's really great to see an across-the-line version that almost brings it up to the capabilities of Apple III sauce, in fact.
You had to get that in there.
I did. I was never a big user of ProDOS, largely because it reminded me of sauce just enough to be frustrating.
Oh, interesting. See, I was the opposite. Coming from DOS 3.3, I adored ProDOS. I found it so elegant, and honestly, I got hooked as soon as I found out I didn't have to type the entire word catalog. Just that alone sold me. But then, the directory structures, and I just found it really elegant and nice compared to DOS 3.3. But so interestingly, until the news of this 2.4 broke, I didn't actually realize that ProDOS was incompatible with clones because apparently one exception to that is the Laser 128 series, which is what I had in the 2E period. And I used ProDOS and loved it on my Laser. So apparently that was the one exception. But by and large, ProDOS did not work on clones.
I believe Laser was one of the only, or maybe the only official legally licensed clone maker, wasn't it? I know Franklin and all these other ones eventually got themselves sued and either went out of business or made clones that weren't really compatible anymore.
Yeah, I think so. The ROMs were written by Central Point Software, and VTech acquired them, and in order to get this technology. And my understanding is that the ROMs are not copies; they are sort of clean room reverse engineered. but they were, as far as I know, 100% compatible. And I'm not sure if they had a license with Apple to do that, or if they just, much like the Compaq did with the PC BIOS, if they just did a legal reverse engineer. I'm not sure which, but for whatever reason, I honestly never found any incompatibility with my laser. And ProDOS worked fine, and I was naively oblivious to the supposed incompatibilities.
Okay. Well, if you want the details of laser and their history with Apple and VTech, there's a nice write-up over, of course, on Steve Wyrick's apple2history.org, and we'll have a link directly to that article in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. Nice work, John. And as mentioned earlier, John and I are currently working on figuring out why my Megabeep ROM is incompatible with ProDOS 2.4.
Yeah, I want to hear all about that.
Yeah, well, I will also like to know what's actually going on. We'll figure it out. All right. Well, it wouldn't be an Open Apple episode if we didn't talk about a whole crap load of new hardware, and we have more of that this month. First up is the Manila Gear 2GS VGA adapter. So this thing's pretty cool. It's sort of a physical connector adapter more than an actual so I wouldn't call it like Plowman's 2C VGA adapter, where it allows you to plug a VGA monitor directly into your 2C. This thing adapts the signals, but does not adapt the video timing. So it's still a 15 kilohertz signal coming out of it, which some VGA monitors can sync to, especially older ones. Like there was this period in the PC market of maximum video standard proliferation, and sort of like in the mid 90s. So if you can get a VGA PC monitor from that era, like the NEC Multisync is a great example, the one with the little parrots in the corner. I think it was, or the ViewSonic anyway. There was some of those monitors that were really good at syncing on everything from MCGA and Hercules all the way up to Super VGA and everything in between. So those monitors can do 15 kilohertz horizontal video, and they would be quite happy to sync to this, I'm sure. But if you went on Amazon and bought a $20 LCD VGA, it's probably not going to. So interesting device. It might help you solve some problems, if you're trying to get your 2GS onto VGA.
Well, and it's only $30, which I think is a lot cheaper than some of the other options that are out there.
Yeah, and it's nice compact design. The other thing this might help with is, there are arcade video doublers, which are used for connecting arcade machine video, which is actually the same as 2GS video. It's 15 kilohertz RGB video. And there's basically two problems. There's the video signal differences, and then there's the video timing differences. So this Manila Gear adapter solves one of those problems, and then you can buy these arcade video adapter boards that solve the other problem. So the combination of those two might solve your problem, because arcade machine restorers have the same problem, where they have, they had arcade machines had these special RGB monitors that were arcade monitors, and they were specifically for arcade video, and that they weren't just televisions or computer monitors. So if those die, you have the same problem of trying to get video onto a regular VGA monitor. So anyway, that was a lot of talk, but hopefully this will help someone solve a problem, and we will link to that in the show notes.
Okay.
I don't know what my obsession is with 2GS video. I talk about it a lot on every show.
Well, until the problem is truly solved.
Yes, people will continue to ask about it on the Apple II Enthusiasts Facebook group.
We need to get out there and talk about the problem, people.
That's right. We're raising awareness. Okay. Let's talk Transwarp, Mike.
Yeah, so Byte Boosters, another Apple II hardware maker that's sprung up in the past year or so and has some great products, has announced that they're now selling via eBay a couple of their own enhancements to the Transwarp GS. The first is the high-speed 32K, what they call the dark cache board. It's the little cache board that goes on your Transwarp. It comes, I think the standard one was 8K when they released it, and now we're up to 32K. And they use, this new one uses fast SRAMs, 8 nanoseconds, which is nice. And looks like they're listing that one for $44.44 US. And the other thing that they're selling is the complete GAL IC replacement set. So, and it uses the same, what they say is the same latest hardware revision in the highest speed from Lattice at 7 nanoseconds. And that's $39.99 also on eBay.
Very cool. Boy, those are good prices, and that is some really, really fast RAM.
Yeah.
I mean, 8 nanoseconds, that's like, back in the day, that was the propagation time of an OR gate. So, I mean, to have an entire RAM chip, 8 nanoseconds, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, that should speed things up, and hopefully you'll be able to reach some higher speeds and stay stable. If you're lucky enough to have one of Henry's transwarp clones that he made a while back, those things ran, I think, pretty stable at around 17 or 18 megahertz. I don't think you'll reach those speeds with this, but if you're until Henry releases more of those, this might have to suffice.
Yeah, and if you're one of those folks who are experimenting with overclocking their transwarps, this would certainly improve your odds of success, I would think.
Sure.
Yeah, one less bottleneck in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. All right, so we've talked a lot in the last couple of months about the 4-play joystick card, and it is now definitely available. I think there was some confusion about that last month, whether you could exchange money for it, and you definitely, in fact, now can. We'll link to Mr. Lagazi's blog, where he has pictures of them. I believe, so he's offering them definitely in kit form. I think they're also for sale assembled. I'm not 100% certain about that, but the photos show the kits that he's putting together. And there's some nice backstory in there as well about the difficulties he's had sourcing retro-looking ribbon cables and some of that kind of thing. But yeah, if you want to buy one, you can now buy one. So we will link to that in the show notes.
That's great.
All right, so this next item is one of those ones that I like because I can still never quite believe that it exists, but I like that it does. So talk to me about remote desktop on my 2GS mic.
It's possible, and actually it's been possible for a little while now. I think we talked about it when it was originally announced a year or so ago. VNC View GS has now been updated to version 1.0. It goes 1.0, the Golden Master, something like that. The update includes raw pixel decoding routines so that raw pixels can be decoded and displayed incrementally while receiving data. And there's now an added option to tune Marinetti for high-speed throughput. And the best part about it is it's free, and you can now VNC from your modern desktop to your 2GS.
Very cool. Yeah, this is a neat tool or toy, I guess I'm trying to say. This reminds me a bit that in the early Mac period, a lot of us kept our GSs going with AppleTalk because, of course, the GS was one of the first machines to ever have AppleTalk, and it was kind of a strange thing. Like, it was way ahead of its time on the GS, and then Apple clung to it for a really long time on the Mac. So there was a pretty long period of time when you could very easily talk to your GS by setting up a standard AppleTalk network. And it was sort of a really underappreciated feature, the 2GS, that existed because nobody ever used it in the Apple II world. But this is kind of reminds me of that. Like, it's a very painless way to get a link to your 2GS from modern equipment. So if you're listening to this podcast, you almost certainly know what ADT Pro is, Apple Disk Transfer Pro, and it is the canonical way to get your Apple II that you just bought on eBay running. If you don't have floppy disks, which you probably don't, it's one of the top questions newbies to the community ask is, hey, I have this Apple II and people are sharing all these disk images on the internet. How do I get them from A to B? And ADT Pro is how you do that. You connect a serial cable or an audio cable or various other easy methods between your modern machine and your Apple II. You push some buttons and ADT Pro moves the software over. And you can either just run it directly out of RAM or you can create new floppy disks with that software. Cool stuff. So Michael Mulhern, who is a KansasFest regular and sort of our representative for the Australians in the Apple II community, has sent us a link to a cool story about ADT Pro coming to the rescue to archive some software that would have otherwise been lost. And it's a fun kind of Saturday afternoon read. It sort of tells the story of this person who was looking for some old Mac stuff and got sucked into some Apple II stuff and ended up landing a giant pile of educational Australian software. And wow. So this educational software that, as far as anyone can tell, only existed in Australia. So it's a real coup to sort of preserve this stuff. And there's great screenshots in there. And he talks about his journey, sort of how the Apple II community helped him and walked him through the whole process of using ADT Pro and getting this software preserved. He reached out to 4AM at one point, which was amusing. 4AM has sort of become an outward-reaching tentacle of the Apple II community. People who aren't in the community have heard of him because he's made inroads into mainstream media. So it refers to him as the infamous archivist, which I like that turn of phrase. I would set my Twitter status to that if I were him. But anyway, it's a good read, and I recommend it.
All right. Well, last month we had we talked a lot, obviously, about KansasFest, as we do, and I believe I forgot to mention that Brian Weiser and John Leake of the Retro Leak. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Sorry, John. Not like he listens. Come on. John and Brian of Call Apple interviewed the keynote speaker Mike Harvey, and they posted that. The text of that is over at Call Apple, and you can listen to the whole thing on Retro Maccast episode 413. And here's a little bit of that now.
And it had this old damn tape cassette for storing things on it. Boy, it's just the absolute worst. But I programmed some things, and then I stumbled across the Apple. I was talking to a friend. He described the Apple.
So what about what year do you think this is?
This was probably 1979.
Okay.
So would this have been the Apple II or the Apple II Plus?
The Apple II.
Okay.
I said, where can I buy one? He told me this little hole in the wall electronics store down in the heart of Dallas. I went down, they had one in the back room. I bought it on the spot. Brought it home, put the TRS-80 in the closet, never went back to it. And so I started in really learning the Apple. At that time, the only thing it had was tape cassettes. But very shortly after that, it came out with a diskette, with a disk drive. And when that came out, I thought, man, I'm in heaven. So by that time, I learned a little bit about how to program the disk. I was bringing forward some of the training I'd had from IBM. And I had a pretty good idea what I wanted in a word processor. I'd been involved in evaluating word processing for Xerox when I was with Xerox. As a matter of fact, I led the team in Xerox that wound up acquiring Diablo Systems.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, Diablo Systems back in the late 70s invented a daisy wheel printer.
Yeah, I remember those.
Plastic daisy wheel printer. It was a patented thing. I headed up the team that went and acquired Diablo Systems for Xerox.
Okay.
And as Xerox started selling word processors based on that printer. So anyway, I learned enough about word processing to know the things I wanted, and started building my own. And then printing them out on a Centronics Impact printer.
So you mentioned in there your time at Xerox, the Palo Alto.
Yeah.
So.
And I think you'd said, or I'd read that you'd actually seen a demonstration from LNK with the mouse and so forth. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
In the mid-70s.
All right. And if you want to hear the whole thing again, that's on Retro Maccast episode 413. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up here because I forgot to mention it, and it's a really great interview, so you should check that out.
Excellent. I think John does listen to the show, but only over Apple Talk. From his old Macs.
Right, yes. From his, what is it, the Banana Junior? Is that what it's called?
Yes. All right. So, speaking of KansasFest, as you mentioned, as we do, one of the big splashes of the show this year was Jeremy Rand's sort of now becoming annual tradition of porting an awesome, popular, casual modern game to the Apple II. And this year, he bit off Bejeweled and did an excellent job of it in double low res. Double low res is kind of the darling of the Apple II community these days. I think Dagan Brock gets credit for starting that with Flappelbird. Everyone's been all in love with double low res lately. It's a video mode that nobody used for 25 years and has probably gotten more use in the last year and a half than it ever did. But anyway, so Jeremy has been continuously updating Bejeweled since KFest. It was sort of, he launched it there. It was his Hackfest entry, which I believe he earned second place for, well-deserved. And he has continued to develop it, and he's added mouse support, and now recently he has added Mockingboard support. So very cool stuff. He's continued to improve the animations and all that sort of thing as well. So definitely worth a look.
Yeah, the Apple II graphics, were kind of the laughing stock of the micro community back in the 80s. So I figure if you're going to go bad, go really bad. I do have there's a little personal or professional maybe envy of his success with this, because I tried Bejeweled at a Hackfest a number of years ago and failed utterly to get anywhere near finish. So congratulations. It's awesome to see that working. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun to play. It's a great implementation for sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of getting newfound access to old stuff, New Shrinkit X has been rewritten, it sounds like. So New Shrinkit X is a cool utility for cracking open Shrinkit archives, which, as many of us know, was the kind of compression tool of choice for a while there, and especially in the later BBSs and so on, in the Z modem days. He's rewritten it in Swift, and there's some screenshots of it and so on here.
Yeah, I rewrote it in Swift and Objective-C with a storyboard providing the UI. This requires Mac OS 10.10. I'm sorry, Mac OS. Okay, is it OS X or is it OS 10? I never know how to pronounce that. So OS X 10.10, is that correct?
Officially, it is. You are supposed to say Mac OS 10. You are supposed to say 10, not X, but everybody.
So Mac OS 10 10.10. It's a lot of 10s there.
Yeah. Everybody says X, but Apple has actually had written documents saying you're not supposed to do that.
I'm actually looking forward to the rebranding. I know a lot of people are upset about the macOS thing that's coming with Sierra, but I'm kind of happy not to have to try to remember that anymore. At any rate, this is the original program was built using Andy Fadden's NewFX library, and it looks like it has some basic operations. You can drag and drop files and folders for an archive managed by OS X's Finder, and back and forth. And there's internal drag and drops and a lot of really neat ways to manipulate your disk images on your Mac. It's still, I don't think, close to what you get with. I've been off Windows so long. What's the name of that? Ciderpress.
Ciderpress,
yeah. It's not close to Ciderpress as far as complete functionality on one package, but it's still a pretty awesome tool.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Ciderpress, because I actually just recently started using that. You'd mentioned a bunch of times on the show here that Ciderpress runs just fine on Macs under Wine, and I had never used Wine before, so I gave that a shot. I installed Wine and I installed Ciderpress, and it was actually really, really easy, and it works perfectly. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I should have been doing that. I've been fighting with Apple Commander on the command line for years, and Ciderpress under Wine just works perfectly. So I recommend anyone try that.
Not that there's anything wrong with the command line.
No, for sure. And an Apple Commander is still essential to my workflow for development, because it is command line, which is really, really nice for automated build flows. But yeah, for just sort of GUI manipulation of disk images, Ciderpress, awesome.
Sure. So now, now we have what was Fest is and is not, because you and I, or specifically I, get this wrong every time. WozFest is not OzKFest. They are two different things, and Europlus would like you to know that. In fact, there's a post on Comsys Apple II, as well as an email that we received letting us know the difference. So mainly, there's even a handy little comparison chart that they've set up. So the attributes are things like frequency, static addressing, formal program of events, length, pizza, chaotic nature, and then there's some comparison chart notes. But WozFest happens several times a year, whereas OzKFest is every 1 to 3 years. And and there's OzKFest does have a formal length, whereas WozFest, I think, just kind of whatever they feel like doing. Anyway, they are definitely two different programs, and we apologize again for getting that wrong.
Yes, we got much email about that, and well deserved, because I believe I also spent at least 45 seconds or so saying all lies about what WozFest is in our last show, and I'm sure all of the Australian Apple II community was cringing and yelling at their iPods during that entire segment. So we apologize for that, and once again, our research department has been round up and shot. Okay, so yes, apologies to our Australian friends and listeners. Moving right along. So this is kind of a cool thing. This is sort of a everything that's old is new again item. This is a DOS 3.3 patch that allows booting from the external 2C drive. So, Mike, you want me to give some technical background on this one?
Sure. Just real quick, with all the news about ProDOS, it's nice to see that DOS 3.3 is still getting some love. Go ahead, Quinn.
Yeah, I agree. Carrington is getting a warm glow right now. One of the last DOS 3.3 holdouts. So let's see. So the deal here is that the very first 2C, the ROM 255 2C, had the ability to sort of boot from the external floppy drive. Not in the way that the 2C Plus does, where you just put it in, turn it on, and it boots from the external drive if the internal drive is empty. It does not do that. But from a command line, you can type PR number 7 unintuitively, and that would boot the external floppy drive on an original ROM 255 2C. They took that ability out in later ROM versions, so there was really no way to boot from the external drive, which was a problem for DOS 3.3. So you kind of lost the ability to boot a lot of 3.3 disks in that way. So people, though, figured out that the code that was in the 255 ROM to do this still works on later 2Cs. They just took the code out of the ROM. So there's this little, I think it's like a 12-byte patch that you can grab, and you can just type that into the monitor and execute it, and then PR number 7 starts working again in the same way that it used to. What this is a patch to DOS 3.3 that allows you to boot those disks from the external drive. So in other words, not just ProDOS disks, but if you do the PR number 7 trick, that will still work with DOS 3.3. It's kind of convoluted. It's sort of an edge case, but stuff like this does become more relevant nowadays, I think, because, we're all using flash storage devices on our Apple IIs. So, which is often a problem for the 2Cs because most things need to be booted and as though they're the only thing in the floppy drive and not living on some flash device. But the flash device is you're often plugged in as some sort of external or secondary floppy device. So, solutions like this have new life.
In the thread on ComSys Apple II, there's actually a mention of how this will, if you have the SD floppy 2 physical drive emulator from a2heaven.com, this patch will definitely help you out.
Good stuff. All right, Mike, you're going to have to do this next one. I don't know what you're going on about.
Quinn, this is all your fault.
Probably, but go on.
Chris Zuars, who we mentioned, I think, before on the show, is a bit of a hardware hack and enjoys that sort of thing, has decided to clone an Apple III. And he did that because he saw you, he followed along with your Veronica project and figured that if you could do that, then he could do this with the Apple III. So I blame you squarely for this, Quinn. Now, of course, there were a couple of people that chimed in immediately and said this is the most complex and advanced 8-bit Apple that was ever created. So you might be getting yourself into something here. But if you want to do it, go for it. So his final post so far is challenge accepted. So that would be totally awesome if he actually pulls it off. And if he does, well, torches and pitchforks headed to Quinn's door.
Yeah, good on you, Chris. It sounds like he had a dead Apple III board, so I guess wasn't repairable or anything. So he thought, well, I'll just take the chips off it and make kind of a homebrew machine with the chips. And I think that's a fantastic idea, honestly. I really, really like this. What I would probably suggest is I wouldn't try to clone the Apple III specifically because, as you've talked a lot about on Drop 3 Inches and here as well, despite my best efforts to get you to stop.
Not going to happen.
the Apple III is obscenely complicated and a very strange beast. And there's probably few people alive today that even have the knowledge to properly clone it, just because not a lot of documentation survived and not a lot was ever known about it in the first place. So that's definitely a tricky thing. But I think that you could take those chips, the 6502 and the basic ROM and things from that machine and build a really cool homebrew machine out of it that wouldn't be an Apple III per se, but would boot a 6502 and have the video chip and have all of the ROM routines for use, in your own homebrew OS or whatever. So I think that's a fantastic project. I almost wish I'd thought of it.
In fact, one of the replies posted to Chris's initial announcement were that they were talking about the Apple III reference manual. It's like 780 pages long or something like that. And in the manual itself, it says, there's a quote that says, "The Apple III is not an easy machine to understand. It has been designed to emulate the Apple II and has done many operations in a different manner while adding many enhancements which contribute to its complexity." So good luck to you, sir.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of little message right in the documentation there. Maybe a message to Apple II users who were expecting some equivalent to the Red Book that just laid out the whole machine bare and they could do whatever they want with it. But the Apple III was not that way.
Yep.
All right, moving along. We got some Steve Jobs news here. What's going on? You snuck this in on me, Mike. What's this news item?
Yeah, this is not necessarily Apple II specific, but I thought it was sort of interesting. So September 16th marks the anniversary both of Jobs leaving Apple in 1985 and returning to Apple 20 or 30 some years later. Yeah, 1997, quite a gap there, but two, I think, very important dates in Apple history.
Yeah. Well, he's dead now anyway.
Screw him.
Okay. Too soon? Well, I don't know. When are we allowed to make Steve Jobs jokes? I don't even know. Am I a monster? Sorry, folks. Let's do some eBay while we still have some listeners left.
All right.
Look, rare! Steve Jobs. Look what we found on eBay.
Okay, Quinn, as you like to point out every month, that we don't talk about eBay
exactly
on this podcast, and so we're going to talk about an eBay item. This is an early 1977 Apple II Revision 0 with the white ceramic 6502 processor, and we do see these every now and then show up. This is serial number 1144. So earlier on in the run there, it looks like it's in beautiful condition cosmetically. It's got all kinds of documentation and everything. Unfortunately, it's going to cost you $30,000. So, yeah, good luck to in fact, this is the guy, I forget what his name is. He lives in Hong Kong and he makes Apple I replica boards. So he's involved at least on some level in the community. So I'm not really sure why he thinks he's going to get $30,000 for this.
Yeah.
Especially since I've seen him active on Apple Fritter, and if you go into the Apple Fritter Apple II forum, there's a thread of nothing but like ridiculously overpriced Apple II gear that shows up on eBay. So I'm not sure what the thinking there is, but if you want to see some beautiful pictures of an early Apple II in great condition, they're there for you.
Yeah, I think this might be some market engineering going on here. There's this thing that people do in antiques markets and other places where you just list things for really high prices for a long period of time, knowing that they're not going to sell, and then it creates this sort of record that that's what these things are worth because that's what they've been listed for years, and then people start paying those prices at some point, and then huzzah, you've created this market for expensive things that didn't used to be expensive. So that might be what's going on with all these Rev Zero Apple IIs. Because, we've never really seen any sell for more than like $1,000, but people keep listing them for 5 figures. So,
well, there were 2 that sold a couple of years ago. One was sold for $25,000, and the one right after that sold for $24,000, $999. But other than those 2, I haven't seen anything close to that, or certainly not what he's asking. Now, the board number does match the serial number on the case. It's 1437 on the board, and that gap is because of the caseless boards that they sold briefly. And so the power supply is sort of an interesting thing. It has the sticker on it has the A2M001 and it's 1466 is a serial number, but it looks like it's the brass power supply rather than the silver one. It does have the switch on the back. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's just the lighting that's making it not look silver. It should be a silver case, not a brass one, but I'm not sure what happened there.
Well, I always wonder with these, since you mentioned the power supply, is it more valuable to have all the original components inside that power supply, or is it more valuable to have something that will continue to work and be safe? Because, these power supplies are going to eat themselves alive when all the capacitors burst and so on inside them. So which do people want? Do they want a perfectly preserved artifact at this price range, or would they rather have something that isn't going to eat itself alive in the next 20 years?
Well, I imagine this is, if you're paying $30K for something like this, you're not looking to use it. You're looking to collect it and maybe show it off. I think, we talked earlier about the different kinds of collectors and why people buy what they do, like with the Apple One. And I think this is maybe another case of that, where I know that people who collect and use these earlier Apple IIs, what I've seen is they want the original power supply, but then they'll pull that and put it on a shelf and put a newer one in there and use it. And then if they're going to show it off at a show or something, then the original parts go back into it.
Yeah, I feel like power electronics are a little bit of a different case, though, because it's sort of like art that self-destructs. So, I mean, it's sort of dangerous to keep some of those original parts in there, even if your goal is to never use it and just preserve it. It's a time bomb in a sense. I guess not seriously. It's going to eat the PCB alive inside the case. Maybe no one would ever notice that. I don't know, but I find it interesting. I guess it's sort of like a painting where the paint is all flaking off. Like, do you try to arrest that decay, or do you just leave it alone because it's original, and then for however long it lives is how long it lives?
Yeah, I think that's part of a much larger argument that if you read magazines about museums, or you go to discussion boards where people who work at museums contribute a lot, you see discussions about at what point, how much patina do we want to leave on whatever this item is? I mean, we pull it out of the ground. Do we leave the dirt on it? Or do we clean it up completely? Do we leave a little bit of dirt on it? And again, it depends on, I think, what you want people to see and what your plans for are. I think that these early Apple II power supplies are riveted shut, so you're kind of looking at a challenge to get it open anyway. But if it were me, I think probably I'd open it up and at least recap it and then seal it. And if I were going to use it, then maybe find a newer one anyway and just put this old one on the shelf.
Yeah, if the power supplies are riveted shut, I can definitely see the argument for leaving it alone, even though it is going to self-destruct, because then you're destructively modifying it then to get it open. So I could see that.
Quite a quandary.
Yeah. All right. I guess we'll wish them the best of luck on that auction. Shall we move on to some feedback?
Oh, we'd like to talk to you if you buy that.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Let's do some feedback.
All right.
You've listened to us talk. Now it's time to tell us what you think.
So it's been a while since we fed back to our listeners. So is that what that means? I don't know. That was a weird turn of phrase.
We'll just move on.
So we got lots of email to catch up on. Let's just say that. All right. Let's see, going back a ways here, we've got an email from listener Jay who says, so he's referring to our interview with Hubert Albers of Soundsmith fame. And we talked a little bit about the differences between Noise Tracker and Soundsmith, and Jay helpfully points out the key thing that we got wrong there, which is that the key difference with Noise Tracker was that it allowed you to have an instrument package that was larger than the Ensoniq's 64K onboard RAM. So that was really the key. Soundsmith, all of the instruments had to fit in 64K, whereas Noise Tracker could swap them out during playback. So that's really cool. Yeah, and apparently the Ensoniq was sort of famous in the 2GS world for having this annoying tick, this sort of audio artifact, and that was actually caused by modifying the DOC RAM while songs were playing. So that's actually the cause of that. Apparently there was just no way around that, and it drove demo writers mad trying to get rid of it. That's actually what caused that if you try to swap instruments in and out during playback. So but apparently he says later GS mod players, such as one called Shell Play, which I'm actually not familiar with, had a clever way of swapping the samples that apparently got around that. So apparently there was a way. We'll have to look more into that. If anyone knows more about that, please let us know. Let's see. Thanks for the great work, podcast. All right. Thanks for writing in, Jay, with those technical details about Noise Tracker. Much appreciated. Moving right along, we got an email from listener Oscar, all the way from Switzerland. And he writes in to let us know that the Vintage Computer Festival Switzerland will be happening again this year in Zurich, and that's November 19 and 20. The Apple II will be represented, he says, but they would love to find more expert local Apple II exhibitors to give the machine the acreage that it deserves. So, if you are a listener anywhere near Switzerland and you can get to Zurich for the 19th and 20th, you should go there and bring your equipment.
Antoine and Olivier's, I think that might be you.
Yes. So he's got a link here to all the exhibits and presentation information, and we will link to that in the show notes. Next, I've got one from Les Harris, who writes in to he writes in to thank me for WeGUI, my recent 80-column mouse text-based GUI system for Apple IIs. Runs under ProDOS, and he writes in to say he's been working on a project to build a sort of standard lib like C runtime environments have on modern machines that runs under ProDOS. So he's been inspired by the community to build something along those lines. And he's been working on it, and he's got a link here to his GitHub, so we will share that in the show notes. Looks like great work. So thanks for sharing that, Les. And you should come to K-Fest and show us all in person.
Definitely.
All right. Next one here. Go through my email box. So I think a couple of months ago we talked about an email from listener Brian. He wanted to take the video signal from his Apple II and convert it to amber or green.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I think we misunderstood his question a little bit. We were saying how just plug in an amber monitor and it's amber. So what he actually wants is to be able to take it to plug it into a modern or sort of any kind of modern or color composite monitor, but have it appear amber or green. So he wants some kind of box that will sort of let him control how it's displayed. I guess sort of like the color killer switches that like the laser had, or things like that, where it was plugged into a color monitor but would still show in black and white, which was great for things like GEOS, where the color fringe would render the screen hard to read. Mm-hmm. But he wants that, but for green and a green or amber. So I'm not sure how you would do that. The closest thing I can think of is, which we probably mentioned last time, is Plamin's 2C VGA. You can plug that into any color VGA monitor, and it has a button that will render the image in amber or green, which is very cool. I don't know how you would do that with any sort of generic composite signal. Maybe there's a device out there that can do that, but I'm not sure. Apparently some monitors can do it, like the Commodore 1084 monitor, which is quite a popular retro monitor, very powerful range of signals that it will do, and it's a really nice monitor. Apparently that does it. It has a switch for controlling that. But otherwise, he's looking for like a box that will do this. So if anyone knows anything, let us know.
This may not be exactly what you want, and I don't know if we mentioned it last time we talked, but the Apple Color Monitor 100 is a digital XRGB monitor that it was built to work out of the box with the Apple III, but with the right card for the Apple IIe, you can plug it in and get a digital signal out, and there's a button on that allows you to switch from color to green. It doesn't do amber, but maybe that's closer. And granted, those monitors are really hard to find, and so are the cards, but maybe that's something, if you can't find any other solution, maybe you could look on eBay or something.
Could be an interesting adventure there. That's a there's lots of sort of interesting problems in Apple II video, but that's one that I have not heard before. So
yeah, let us know what your progress is on that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so a few months ago we talked about Gumball and the amazing sort of now infamous write-up that 4AM did on the copy protection in Gumball, and a lot of us were just really flabbergasted by the complexity and depth of that copy protection and why someone would do that for, you know, what was a big game for the time, but, you know, arguably maybe didn't warrant quite that level of NSA-esque copy protection. So we were wondering if there was a story there. And amazingly, this is the Apple II community in a nutshell. We got an email from the author of that copy protection, or co-author of that copy protection system, Roland Gustafson himself. So I hope I get all the details here right, Roland. I did some research with 4AM and a couple of other sources. But apparently Roland was involved in writing custom operating systems for games, for various sorts of games. If you look him up on Moby Games, which we can link to, he's got a whole bunch of credits for different Apple II games where he's written custom operating systems for them. And as part of that, he was deeply involved in the copy protection of them. So he wrote us to say, howdy, Robert, referring to the primary author of Gumball, the gameplay itself. Howdy, Robert and I added tons of copy protection to Gumball because we were, or possibly still are, insatiably irrational and silly at times. It was like a feedback loop trying to outdo each other with silliness. So simple engineer mirth, I think, is and whimsy is the reason that the copy protection is so insane on Gumball.
Best reason.
Yeah. So one of the things that 4AM let me know is one of the specific examples of Roland's work there was that there was a particular interrupt flag that had to be set during the level load routines, and it was just kind of a sneaky way to set a flag. And if that flag wasn't properly set, then the gameplay would sort of be degraded on the next level. So to the point of sort of being unplayable. So like the gates wouldn't open anymore. Balls would pass through gates that were closed. Bins wouldn't move more than a couple pixels at a time. The gumballs would fall through solid objects. So things like that. So basically the game sort of, rather than just not running or something, it just sort of became unplayable. And I really, really love this. I wanted to talk a little bit about this item. Because, there were a few games that did this, sort of degraded the gameplay rather than sort of tipping their hand that we know you've copied this or tried to crack this. This is a problem that we face in modern mobile games, which is the industry I'm in now. And it's a big problem because these games are really massively social. So, it's one thing if you want to crack your own personal copy of some game and cheat in it and do whatever you want. But if you do that in a massively social game with hundreds of millions of players that are competing in tournaments and leaderboards and things, you're ruining everyone else's experience by cheating. So it's not enough to sort of accept it. We really do have to stop it. Otherwise, these cheaters will, destroy all the leaderboards and all the tournaments and everything for people that are paying money and trying to have fun. So, people do this with jailbroken devices, and they use memory editors and so on to find the currencies and so on and manipulate their scores. So we do a lot of basic security precautions in the apps to prevent that. But ultimately, that's much like copy protection on the Apple II was. It's if you choose to pick that fight, you're signing up for a cat and mouse game that will never end. So we need a kind of a better way. And the trick that most companies are using nowadays is what we sort of call Cheater Island. So knowing that we can't prevent people from cheating, but it is fairly easy to detect the cheating. There's lots of ways I can't talk about, but things like, the transaction signatures on your currencies and there's all sorts of client and server ways to detect the cheating. It's very easy to detect when people are doing it. If we just detected those people and then just banned them, of course, they would instantly just create a new account and do it again, right? So you can't win doing that. So what we do actually is without telling them, we move them to a different server with all the other cheaters, and so so that server has a leaderboard with ridiculous negative numbers, and it's all riddled with craziness. and they love it, because they can keep doing what they want to do. They want to enjoy the game by cheating in it or hacking it or whatever. So they get to keep doing that, and they're unaware that we know that they know that they're cheating. So, well, I guess now they know because I just said it. But but generally speaking, if you're cheating in a mobile game right now, we know. And so the best thing we can do is move you off to the side where you can't hurt anybody without telling you, and let you keep doing it. And that's win-win. So the mainstream leaderboards and tournaments and so on still work correctly, and you still have your fun and are none the wiser, and everybody wins. So that's how we currently solve that problem. And I love the parallel, because that's very much what this is like. I know that there were games where if it detected it was cracked, the later levels would just get really, really, really hard, like unplayably hard. And that was another way to kind of, acknowledge that, that you've cracked the game without actually letting you know, so that you just try to crack it better next time. People would just not play the cracked versions because they seemingly sucked, So I like that.
I remember on the PC a number of years ago, there was this first-person shooter that came out. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me right now, but the makers of it, when it came out, they touted, we have this new copy protection system that, you can copy it all you want, but like the further you get into the game, the harder it is to aim and to run, and your vehicles will crash and things like that. And they made a big deal about talking about it. And one of the pirate groups at the time did an analysis of the code and found that there actually wasn't any protection like that at all in the game. The whole thing was a scare tactic, to keep people, like you said, from scaring them away from playing the cracked copies. I thought that was kind of funny. There's an article on makeuseof.com from 2014. It's called the five strange video game copy protection measures used in history. And there's nothing about Apple II there, but like there's the Nintendo logo that's used as a key, because it's, etched into the back of the disc. And the most, interesting one that they list here was one called a lens lock, where you hold this magnifying glass up in front of the screen to get the information that you need to play the game. And, but it's a fun little article. It doesn't take but a few minutes to read, and we'll have that in the show notes. But yeah, this sort of back and forth war that goes on between the makers and the pirates fascinates me.
Yeah, I think wasn't Elite one of the games that was protected with that lens lock thing?
May have been.
Yeah, I only ever had the crack of it, but I remember I remembered reading that you needed this lens lock thing. Anyway, all right. So yeah, thanks, Roland, for writing in, and that's someone else we should probably get on the show. Okay, moving right along. We've got an email from listener David, who sent us quite a nice long email. Says many nice things about the show. Thank you very much for that, David. I'm going to skip ahead to kind of the meat of his email here. He's got a question to which he does not know the answer, and I don't either. So maybe you, Mike, do, or some of our listeners do. David writes, I have a question that I do not know the answer to. I have an early Apple IIc ROM 255 with oscillator package fitted for serial port 2 that has a patch of the PCB in the lower left-hand side with a number of resistors and a 555 timer IC that is not fitted. On some Apple IIc motherboard photos on the internet, this area is populated with components. Others do not have them fitted. Do either of you know what the circuitry's purpose was? Later memory expansion motherboards do not have this area at all, as the PCB was redesigned. I have no idea. The only 555 timers I was aware of were for the game port, so this is something I know nothing about. Mike, have you heard of this?
Maybe it's elaborate copy protection.
Yeah. I'm sure someone out there, possibly named Tony Diaz, would know that. So yeah, let us know. And he sends a picture from Australia of a type of cookie called Dunkies. So
Oh, I want one of those.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. It looks like it's a cookie that comes with a tray of chocolate to dip in, yeah, they're called Dunkies. So thank you very much for that.
You're going to be sued soon for your last name.
No, I just someone sent me these things. I think I need to own some Dunky cookies. All right, moving right along. Listener John writes in to ask, hey guys, listening to your great podcast now. Thanks very much. Any chance you guys might cover the current status of the 2GS Transwarp clone? Well, I assume you're referring to the Reactive Micro Transwarp clone. And there were some prototypes made, right, Mike? But it hasn't been available for sale as of yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, there were, I think, probably no more than 10 of them that were made and sent out. I think it was partly proof of concept that this could be done and partly to gauge interest. I know that the whole process was pretty expensive because they had to sand down some boards and there's a lot of gals that needed to be cracked and things like that. And I think the idea is that they're planned for the future. I know that they've restarted their store and they're selling some hardware, and that some of the funds that they're making from the hardware that they're selling are going to eventually be put back into this project. I do know that they are still planning to do this at some point, but there's no schedule for when we might see those, unfortunately. And it's kind of sad because they're really great.
Yeah, that is a shame. Okay. Well, sort of related to that, if you want to keep tabs on that project and everything else Reactive Micro is doing, they have a new news section on their blog or on their website with an RSS feed, so you can be notified as soon as anything changes on that or any of their other projects. So we will link to that in the show notes. That's, I'm sure, the best possible way to keep tabs on what Reactive Micro is up to.
Or you can just email Henry. I think his contact info is on the site, and he seems to be more than happy to answer questions. So. Yeah,
in fact, he says feel free to email him anytime, support@reactivemicro.com. So that'll get you in touch with Henry. Okay, that's all the feedback I have. Mike, do you have any?
Yeah, I do have one more. This is a feedback posted on our open-apple.net website. Plug. From Tom Porter. And Tom writes, "Hello, I am Tom Porter, the creator of last year's Music Master RPG, and I have some news and a demo that perhaps you would like to try out if you don't happen to find it by normal means. I have been hard at work on a sequel to the Dogfighters of Mars game, and this time it features a ton of 1-bit audio clips and cutscenes along with sprites and other things. I've also been working very hard at creating a system to make multitasking music possible without extra hardware, and I seem to have done it. Here is a demo of the SFX audio engine, and of course it's still in development, but I think it's pretty close to being workable on a large scale. Try it out, and if it's newsworthy, I would love to have you comment about it on your next edition of Open Apple, that or the Dogfighter game in general. There are a few demos of it floating around, and thank you for your time." And he's got a link to that demo that we'll have in the show notes. I have not had a chance to play this yet. Have you, Quinn?
I have not, but I've been following Tom. He's been busy on the Apple II Enthusiasts Facebook group and also in the new Apple Arcade game design enthusiast group, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, he's been busy on Facebook with his audio exploits. And this sound engine that he's been building sounds really, really cool. My understanding is it runs entirely out of aux memory and can run, in parallel with whatever else your game is doing. So it's really cool stuff. Tom's been doing a lot of really pretty awesome audio things. So I will definitely be checking that out.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next time.
And yeah, we should give a quick shout out to the Apple Graphics and Arcade Game Design Enthusiast Facebook group. It's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll link to that in the show notes. This was started by Michael Packard, and it's based on a book by Jeffrey Stanton from 1984. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, January of 1984. It's listed on Amazon. Used copies start at $65 though, so might look elsewhere for a PDF or something.
Yeah, well, good news on that front. So there is a PDF of it on archive.org, and even better, there is a PDF of it in this Facebook group. So myself included, a lot of people don't know that Facebook groups have a files section. It's not very obvious, but there is one, and the files section on this Facebook group has the PDF for you to read. So Michael's been really, really busy. He's been sort of going through this book and kind of reteaching himself Apple arcade game programming. And he's called it his sort of midlife crisis of sorts. And, he's been very prolific posting videos of his progress, and he's building kind of a Galaxian style alien vertical shooter. His progress is really remarkable. He's doing, it's really fun to watch. And he's really doing a good job of selling this book, because clearly this book is a very fast road to getting the hang of high-res graphics programming. So I recommend it. Which is good,
because that's kind of intimidating.
It is, yeah. It's very intimidating. And, I've been doing a little bit of that myself lately, starting with Chris Torrance's new edition of Roger Wagner's Assembly Lines. And that's a great read also for Apple II graphics.
Yep, definitely.
Really really enlightening. A book I wish I'd had back in the day. But this Apple Graphics and Arcade Game Design book is really outstanding as well. It would have been easy to write off from the cover because the cover art, it's a little bit cheesy. It looks like one of these kind of throwaway shovelware sorts of books. But it turns out the content in it is really, really excellent. So I recommend flipping through this Facebook group if you want to see some cool progress there.
Awesome.
All right, well, that's all the feedback we have. And I think that about wraps it up for the show. Mike, any closing thoughts?
I don't think so. Not this month. Thank you again, Kate, for joining us. It's great. It's always great to talk to somebody who has experience with the Apple II that's not necessarily hardware design or software programming. We love having those people on as well, obviously, but it's great to get other perspectives sometimes.
Yeah, and I absolutely love the enthusiasm and the excitement and the fresh ideas that she brought to K-Fest. She was a breath of fresh air, so we'll be glad to see her next year as well.
Yep, definitely.
All right, well, until next month, thanks everybody for listening, and we will talk to you later.
See you soon.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Subscribe to us in iTunes or visit us at open-apple.net, where you can browse our extensive catalogue of past episodes or read our blog. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you didn't, your comments, questions or ideas are always welcome. Send them to feedback at open-apple.net.
Let's wait to get a link to your Tier 2GS from Modern Equipment.
Yeah.
Good talk, Mike. Okay.